I'm off center. And that's, there we go. There's a weird thing with OBS where if it's set to default, you actually have to tell it to check default again before it comes back, which I'm a bit like, whatever. Whatever. I see that there's a wrestling fight going on in chat, so there you go. And thanks so much for keeping that sub up, Pukajutsu. Very appreciated. And there's Liz. Hey, Liz. So this is it. This is the first RPG Clinic stream from this new location, which at the moment, the only way that you can tell is that the green screen's a little bit off because my lighting is a little strange. It is the way. But one thing that I can say is that I can actually get up out of my chair and move around without knocking into the green screen. I could also even... I won't, but I could dab without smashing the screen down, as seen in a scrub check over on another channel. But it is good to see all of you. It is appreciated that you're tuning in. And, oh, we got the crosshair as well. You seem to be awake. Totally recognize, of course, that we're tuning in at a time that isn't necessarily the best for our European friends, but they're there and we appreciate them just as much, if not more so, than everyone else. I have to admit that today my whole place had the same blue grid. Yeah, it's true. Actually, honestly, behind me there is a grid. It's just a different kind of grid that we'll have to work out. But I also totally forgot to close the door. So I'm going to go and do that. Give me 2 seconds here. Got to make sure that that I isolate as best I can. There are other people who will be around eventually. Today is the day that I am looking forward to receiving a bed frame. So I am warning you in advance that if for some reason I have to leap up and disappear for a few moments, it's because I literally have to accept delivery of a place to sleep, which I have not had a proper one in a little bit of time, and I would like to. So that's just a thing that we have to remember and keep in mind. No, actually, believe it or not, as much as there is plenty of IKEA stuff in and around this house, the bed frame for once will not be IKEA, actually. Liz, I won't get into it just yet, but it's something that was completely my fault that I have to talk to you about later on. But it was completely something that I have to. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry that you had to find out this way. I was hoping that it would resolve itself before then, but this time around it did not happen. To be completely and perfectly honest, I am a terrible person. So I have to to be completely honest about that, and that's just gonna throw me off for like the next few hours. But yeah, Liz and Scott went to a great amount of effort to help us in a way that then unfortunately the bed frame didn't work. So we have to return it to IKEA and get another one, but it's completely my fault. Either way, so this is actually going to be our new stream area if all things go well. This office is being kind of constructed to be that way. I can't really show it to you yet. It's not exactly complete or finished or even looks all that decent. There's still a lot of crud that I have to deal with, but it is hopefully going to be our next location, so that we're going to be able to enjoy ourselves when hopefully we're able to all be in the same place and we can game together once more. That's going to be a little while, though. Last that we have checked, gatherings are still prohibited at least up until the next 2 weeks, and I would say that it's almost a virtual certainty that they will still not be extended until later on. So, but yeah, at any rate, I'll be very honest. I can't possibly follow up to last week's clinic hours where Liz and Scott put forward a masterclass when it came to dealing with romance, when it comes to role playing from a player's perspective. Now, I don't have really much to add. They covered a whole lot in that particular stance. Some highlights, of course, being the idea that romance is something that you have to be very cautious of, not just for you and for the person who you are engaged in that relationship with at the table, but also everyone else at that table, because it affects everybody there. I would really recommend that you take a look. Honestly, everything boils down to that. Just make sure that everybody at the table is okay with what's happening. But it is definitely worth a watch. So you'll be able to see that. It's on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/RPGClinic. Yep, word hole. It's always what it's about, is making sure that word hole is completely respected at all times. The best thing that I can tell you is romance is the sort of thing that you can absolutely have so much fun playing around with when you find the right group to do that with. So it will be a struggle for everybody, but that's actually something that I kind of want to start out with today. As much as today, I'm going to be taking your questions, your comments. We're just going to go for it natural, because I honestly did not have a ton of time to prepare for today's RPG clinic. One thing I do want to say is one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn was that finding the right group is integral to being able to enjoy this hobby. And kind of what does that mean, the concept of finding the right group? So let's have a look. Let's talk about that for a little bit, see what we can find. Where's my topic here? So we're going to be... Can I? No, I can't. All right, so it's got to be like that. So I started playing when I was very, very young. I was gifted a copy of D&D 2nd edition, and I played with my next door neighbors, because honestly, that's who were available. That's what we could do. And we didn't really play properly, and we, despite the fact that I wanted to use all the right rules and all the right stuff, they were more interested in just goofing around, and honestly, I was happy to do that. But as I grew up and as I started to get further and further into the hobby, I have realized that there's an art to finding the right people to play with. I recognize that this is not an easy thing for most people to find and be selective about the group that they play with, because often it feels like that this is an isolated kind of hobby, that it's niche, that there aren't a lot of people, hey, welcome 12 deck boxes, that it's difficult to find a group, and that when you find a group, you're lucky to have one, and you're lucky to deal with the people who you've got, and that's who you have to play with, and that's all the choice that you have. For other people, it's, but this person is my best friend, but this person is my romantic partner, but this person is my child. And it becomes then a question of, but now I have to play with them because I have no choice. The reality is that you always have options, especially as gaming becomes more and more entrenched in the online atmosphere, and you're able to play with people from around the world. If you wish, there are different ways that you can find the group that is best for you, that will be the one that you can find kindred spirits with, that you can engage in the kind of role-playing that I didn't even realize I had access to during the majority of my gaming career. You can get a lot of great gaming with a group that isn't perfect. And trying to find the perfect group is an exercise in futility because, first of all, perhaps a perfect group doesn't exist outside the one that I have. But there's also, it's pointless to wait for perfection. We often talk about trying to find the one. Well, the reality is that you find your 0.6 or your 0.7 and you round up, as Dan Savage is fond of saying. So that's the first sort of thing that I can suggest to people, is you really want to make sure that when you're looking for your gaming group, when you're looking for the people to play with, you can't be too picky. As much as the rest of my advice is going to be about making sure to find the correct people for you to play with, I do have to point out that if you are too picky, you may find yourself with no group to play with. It's very easy for that to happen. So just be aware that you have to make certain compromises, and that also remember that if everyone else is a problem, the common denominator is you. If you find that no matter what you do, there's always some excuse why somebody isn't correct, well, you have to start reflecting at that point on whether it's in fact yourself that is an issue here. The Crosshair says, never force a group, no matter who they are, friends, family, what have you. Hell, even if I would help John et al. Move, fight Eldritch Gods, or do anything really, if I wasn't having fun, wouldn't be a group for me. Unlikely, but still. So that's something else that I would point out. You can't ever feel like you're forced to play with certain people. And if you do feel like you're forced to play with certain people, then you really have to question why that is and what you can do about it. The most common that I've seen about being forced to play with somebody is they're my gaming group. They're the people who I already play with, so I have to play with them. And the most that I can do is add people to this group. I can't subtract from it. I know. And this is one of those instances in which it is very, very difficult for you to follow the advice I'm about to give. But even as much as I have had difficulties sometimes following my own advice, this is one piece of advice that I now will never hesitate to do ever again, which is you are always, always, A, allowed to quit, and B, allowed to ask somebody to leave. If it's not your game, you don't necessarily have the right to ask somebody to leave, but you can still bring that up. If there's another player who is absolutely ruining your experience, you can, in fact, bring it up with somebody else and say, I need help. This is a problem. And I'm also not going to pretend that every problem can just be hashed out. You just have to talk it over and then everything will be fine. Not the case. Sometimes you just don't get along with somebody, or sometimes somebody is outright a problematic, abusive even, and that needs to be dealt with. You cannot put up with it for too long. Once you know that there's an incompatibility, you have the right to present it, not even necessarily in a vindictive way, but there is an ultimatum there, and it's okay. As much as I might like to say, you are, as much as you might like to say, like, ultimatums are terrible, or if it's either me or him or her or them, in this particular case, you can put it in such a way without making it a dramatic moment of emotional anger, but to simply say, hey, so I want to keep playing. At the same time, if I'm playing with this other person, I am not having fun. So I'm afraid I have to go, or this other person has to go. And you have to realize that in a lot of cases, if you are the one volunteering this information, you're the one who's going to have to leave. I'm also here to tell you that you're better off doing that. Quitting is one of the best things that you can do in a role-playing game. Quitting is one of the best things that you can do in life, because in general, if you are quitting, it is because you have determined that the current situation that you are in is not correct for you, and you are ready to find what is. When I'm confronted by horrific life events, like somebody quitting their job because they couldn't put up with it anymore, or somebody quitting a relationship because they were unhappy and wanted to find a new one. As much as these events are sad and that I feel empathetic and sympathetic, and I wish that the situation could be different, at the same time, there's always in me a secret thrill. The idea that somebody is doing something for themselves, that they can then stand up and move forward and do something else that gives them the chance at happiness. And the same thing is true if you quit your job, it's because you're going to go on to a better job, hopefully. Now, if you quit your job because you feel like you just want to stay at home, I mean, maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe that's best for you. But if you quit your relationship, then generally when a relationship ends, it's because both parties deserve to have a more fulfilling relationship. That doesn't mean the relationship was a failure. And it doesn't mean that the relationship should never have happened. It means that the relationship is over and it's time for something new. And the exact same thing is true when it comes to your games. If you are playing in a game and you decide that you no longer wish to play in that game and you wish to play a different one, or even stop playing for a while, that doesn't mean that the previous game that you have played was wrong or incorrect, or that you shouldn't have played. What it means is that now it doesn't work for you and it is time for you to walk away. And often this can happen based on the people who you're playing with. Kaylin says, Nafam, sometimes you need to move someone out if they're not being a team player. If the majority of the players are against a problem person, then that problem person has got to go. So now, what I say that if you say it's this person or me, and that more often than not, that means that you're going to have to be the one to leave. That's assuming, of course, that it's a conflict of personality and not necessarily that somebody is a problem player. If somebody's a problem player, then they should be kicked out right away. You should speak up, and everybody else should have the emotional maturity to realize that and to get them the fuck out of your game. But I also recognize that there are times where you're playing with somebody and you just can't deal with that person. The biggest example that I can give is if you are in a romantic relationship with somebody and then that romantic relationship ends, it can often be painful to spend a lot of time with that person, especially if the breakup was acrimonious. And if you're in a game together, then that might mean that one of you has to leave. And if you're the one who blinks first, you might be the one packing your bags. And that is unfortunate. But if somebody is a problem player, then they have to get out. And it is something that you need to establish. Part of finding your right group is making sure that anybody who you do not want in that group is no longer in the group. And as much as I hate to say it, you will feel better if you are, if not outwardly brutal, if you are inwardly brutal about whether somebody needs to stay or go. You can Marie Kondo your gaming group, hold everybody in your hands and determine whether they spark joy or not. That's one way of doing it. But you definitely need to isolate the people who are not bringing you the happiness that you deserve while you're engaging in a hobby like role-playing, and get rid of them. Kaylin also points out, quitting is not a sign of failure. It means you've understood your boundaries and are actively engaging in maintaining them completely, right? And your boundaries are allowed to change. And your boundaries are allowed to be stretched when you need them to or when you want them to. Just because when you started, your boundaries weren't exceeded, doesn't mean that your boundaries won't become pushed upon towards the end. And just because your boundaries are pushed upon doesn't mean that it was a waste of time. It just means that it is time for it to end. I've sworn. Oh, I swear. I mean, yeah, honestly, you should be Marie Kondoing your gaming group. Hey, Requiem. Your game, so that, in a way, if you're looking to find the right group, that's what you need to find. You need to make sure that everybody at the table is somebody who actively makes your gaming experience better. And if they don't, then they should not be there. And just because they're present and that means that the game can run doesn't necessarily mean that they're making your life better. And just because they aren't actively making you hate your group doesn't mean that they're actively making your group better as well. If you are, okay, as an example, I had been running a very long campaign with 3 players. One of these players was somebody who was actively invested in the game, was definitely interested in continuing, enjoyed playing with her. Great. At the time, a player who I definitely wanted to keep around. Second player was that player's significant other, who was playing, I would say, 50% because his girlfriend was playing, and 50% out of habit towards the end. And that's not a good reason to keep somebody in the group. They could still engage in, like, it was still fun. It was still fun to have this person around, and the games were still fun, but definitely this person was checked out and not actively contributing to the fun, just kind of there. And finally, there was a player who was filling out the group, who definitely had moments where they really contributed to the group dynamic, and then some moments where they completely torpedoed it. And you didn't know which you were going to get on that particular day. Was it going to be the wonderful player who you absolutely loved to play with, or was it going to be the person who you had to drag along, metaphorically kicking and screaming through the game? Again, not worth it. So I had a gaming group where we were playing and we were having fun. And I had one player who I really liked playing with, one player who I could take or leave, and one player who was either amazing or terrible. This is not a group that I wanted to maintain or keep. I'll also point out that since then I don't actually have any contact with any of them. And these were friends that I had for over a decade, and that's okay that those friendships ended, that they have since receded into memory. And again, doesn't mean that they were a mistake. It doesn't mean that the game was a mistake either. But as I grew older, I started to realize that just because I was playing in a game that I enjoyed, it didn't mean that I was with the group that I deserved to have. I deserved to have a game that I would really, really like to play with. And at a certain point, I should say that I played with some of these players with people who I play with now. And I started realizing that the people who I was really interested in playing with, they were over on one side of the table. And the people who I was like, you're here because I feel like you have to be, because I used to play with you, and because it's only fair that you continue to play in my games because we played already for so long and we're used to it, we're on this side of the table. And that's not good enough. It isn't good enough. I want to do, by the way, a very special shout out to Husbeast Thirst Kitty. Husbeast Thirst Kitty, we know that you're crying to get out, and all you need to do is just embrace that name and just hold it tight, hold it into yourself, because Husbeast Thirst Kitty, you deserve to be seen. Essential medications are not one of them. So one of the things that people don't, the Marie Kondo method, just to go over it. So we had Gil Adgood who did give a brief description, which is basically an organization technique to get rid of junk by determining if something makes you happy. Yeah, essentially that's what it is. The Marie Kondo method states that if something does not spark joy, if something does not actively make your life better because it exists and is in your home, then it probably should not be in your home. The idea that just because you have storage space doesn't mean that it should be filled. Just because you think that an item deserves to be in your home doesn't mean that it necessarily should be. Because we are often wrong. Things like we hold on to things for sentimental reasons. But is that sentimentality because it actually brings us joy or because we feel an obligation? Sort of like how I used to hold on to greeting cards that people would give me, like birthday cards, but I never read them again. I would literally hold on to them. I'd put them in a box. I'd never look at them again. By the time that I would come across them, it would just be another thing that I'd have to move around, and they weren't actively bringing me joy anymore. At the same time, when I decided to get rid of them, my mother was horrified because she was like, but you know, like people went to a lot of effort to write those, and you know, like it's not that big. It's just a small box. It's no problem holding on to them. And I said, well, I enjoy receiving these cards, and they do all of their work when I open them and I read them, and I cherish the memory, but I don't need the card anymore. I will not sit down and just read those cards, especially because honestly, most of those cards are, you know, happy birthday. Great. It's great. But I know that my uncle cares about me and loves me. I don't need to know that again and again and again. So that is just a thing that I have to hold on to, that I have to realize while I'm here. The same thing is true with things like, I like this bin because this bin holds my cables. Well, the bin might bring you great joy because it organizes the cables in your life, but do you need all of those cables? And I realized that I would rather throw out things and occasionally risk having to buy something again than to hold on to everything thinking that I might need them. And that's where we get back to gaming groups, because holding on to players thinking that one day if I don't have that player then I may not be able to play is not a good enough reason to hold on to a player if they're taking up space, emotional space in your life. It's okay to get rid of them. It's okay also to say, not now, and maybe someday in the future we'll play again, but right now, no. That's fine. Not everybody deserves to play in every game. And if I had to play with everybody who's asked to play with me, then I would be playing in games nonstop and I'd be miserable. Not because of the people who've asked me or people I don't like, but just because I only have the capacity to enjoy a certain number of games in my life. So the Marie Kondo that druid, if you're no longer having joy in being a bear. Yep, basically. Although I like thinking of condoing something as appreciating it as opposed to discarding it. It's sorry about Twitch being a jerk, Gil Edgood, but if you come back, great. If you don't, we'll see you on the YouTube. But yeah, get into the habit of really paying attention to whether something actually brings you happiness, and that includes the players in your life. If I look at the players that I have right now, I know that each one of them are experimental without going off the deep end. They are ready to take risks, but also have the emotional maturity and capacity to know when a risk is too much and that they need to pull back from it a bit. That they they match my playstyle enough that it doesn't feel like that they are suffering playing the games that I want to run, but at the same time they're not so dedicated to playing what I want that they won't bring up what they want in a game. all of this stuff is really important. They complement my playing instead of just blindly following it. So I appreciate that from them, and it's true of each one of them. And if it no longer became true for one of them, then I would have to address it. This isn't to say that there aren't ups and downs. Pardon me. This isn't to say that there aren't ups and downs. This isn't to say that there might not be a day where somebody will do something and I'll be like, oof, that's not what I expected from them. Or that somebody might become upset during a game, and that will cause some emotional labor from me or from the other players to help out. Or that somebody will message me in private between games and mention that there's something that I need to be aware of, and it means that now I have to go to some extra effort. All of this stuff happens, and it's to be expected, because again, nothing can be perfect at all times. So we encounter this, and we handle it, we deal with it. But if I started noticing that instead of it being a high up here, and it started really dipping low, that's when I have to start really evaluating whether changes need to be made. And changes don't immediately have to start with kicking somebody out of the group, but I think that we all know there comes a certain point where you know that something is a lost cause. Find those lost causes and lose them. Do yourself the favor and that other player the favor, because now you both have the ability to find games that will make you happier. Now, what of course about the player who is like, but I'm having such a great time in this game, I really love it, I don't want to stop. You'll find the same thing in relationships. Sometimes a relationship ends unilaterally. One person is like, I do not wish to continue, instead of both people agreeing that the relationship is over. Does that really mean that you're doing the other person a favor? Yeah, you are. Because nobody worth being with wants to be in a relationship where the other person is miserable. And as much as they might, in the moment, react emotionally by seeing what they're losing, you are eventually going to be doing them a favor by letting them find the game where not only can they stretch their own wings and be able to play the way they want, but everyone else will appreciate them for it as well. And in a really rough way of saying it, sometimes you have to let somebody hit bottom so that they can understand that their behavior isn't conducive to good gaming. And by finding themselves gameless, that gives them the impetus to change their behavior. Putting up with somebody generally doesn't encourage change. I remember very distinctly one person who nobody wanted to game with, but because he was around all the time, he was in a lot of different games, and nobody really wanted him, but nobody felt right telling him to go away until I did, and it caused scandal. It made it seem like I was a bad friend, and I said, well, I guess I don't want to be his friend. He's a jerk. He's a jerk to the people I care about. He's mean to people, and nobody does anything about it because they just assume that that's the way it goes. And I know that it was a hard thing for him to hear, but eventually he kind of made his way back. He and I never had the friendship that we once had. That was over. But eventually, when he started playing with people again, he was more kind. He was more considerate. And he was more open to making sure that everybody at the table was having a good time. And that only happened because he was encountering a situation whereby he could not get away with his bullshit anymore. I had to tell him to fuck off. And when he realized that I was serious and that I wasn't going to back down, his options were to never game with this group again or to change his behavior and earn their trust again. And he took the harder route. He earned trust again. Not with me, but he didn't want to play with me. There are some times where you say things that, just cause irreparable harm. I tried to do my best to not burn bridges, but some bridges will burn, or some bridges will fall apart because they were never meant to stay up. I'm not certain because of course, I'm clouded by years and personal bias. Maybe I could have done something to salvage that relationship better, but I remain pretty convinced that I wouldn't do it another way if I was confronted with that situation again today. I needed to be blunt, and I needed to be harsh because he wasn't listening otherwise. Putting up with something and putting up with something and putting up with something is not going to fix an issue. What you are doing in that situation is you are training your player that they can get away with things because you will not take action against them. Sometimes a threat is enough, but if your threats are never followed up on, your threats become toothless. Some bridges need to be doused with kerosene. That's fair. That's fair. What is escandolo? Is this something that I'm missing, a reference that I'm missing? So the crosshair mentions this also works as a moral boost in right company. Whenever I think I'm doing something wrong in chat as a mod, etc., I remember that I haven't been told off yet. I know enough great folk who are direct enough to say, so quiet equals all nominal. But I'm actually going to go one further than that, crosshair, with you. I'm going to point out that you do check. I've seen you check with people. Because being silent and assuming that people will tell you if something is wrong is dangerous to do if that's all you do. But that isn't all that you do. And because you check, you also create an atmosphere where you know and create an open receiving atmosphere where, because you've checked in the past, it means that you also will be receptive to if somebody tells you that something needs to change. So at that point, then silence is okay. It's just Spanish. It means scandal. Okay. Yes, it does sound more fabulous than scandal. Okay. Term frequently used in the drag community. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So, Crosshair, I don't mean to tell you that you're wrong. You're doing everything right. I'm just warning other people that silence isn't necessarily means a good thing. You have to create an atmosphere and an environment where silence does mean that that people can that you can trust that people would tell you, because otherwise just saying like, well, somebody would tell me if I was doing something wrong, not necessarily. If you're the crosshair, yes, because you're awesome and you've done enough that people know that they can tell you. But there are people out there who encourage either fear or apathy in others, and fear and apathy are very, very powerful forces. So if you are wondering if somebody actually gives a damn enough to tell you something, they may not, because they may not be able to overcome their fear or their apathy in that particular case. So we have that to worry about. I'm just getting a message. Where is this? Yep. Okay. It wasn't the message that I was hoping to get, but it is a message that I'm pleased to see. So, I got that. That works. So, new burger. Oh boy. That is absolutely something to celebrate, Kalen. The fact that it's Thursday is also something to celebrate. I like celebrating Thursdays. Fridays are one of my favorite days of the week, even though I do have to work on Fridays, because it always is tinged with the excitement of the weekend. So Thursday afternoons tend to feel really great for me because I'm like, yeah, tomorrow's Friday. And if there isn't a better reason to go and get a new burger, I don't know what is. As long as a new burger is what I think it is. Maybe new burgers mean something different for you. Now, I hate every other Friday only because I work every other weekend. Requiem, completely fair. When I used to work weekends, Fridays lost their luster as well. Thankfully, at this point, I do not work Fridays, so I do not work weekends. Burger joint, I'm down. I should also point out, just while we're talking about finding the right group, that again, don't seek perfection, don't put up with things that are wrong, but also understand that this process will take time. It'll take time for you to learn what you need and what you want. If you've just started role-playing, play. Be aware of the warning signs and make sure that you keep yourself safe, but play, because that's how you're going to find out who you should be playing with. Once you've been playing for a long time, understand that you can be picky. And I would point out, and this is tough to hear, but in much the same way that if you are dumped and you think, but no one will ever love me out there. First off, yes, they will. And second, there will be people out there who you can find to game with. You will not be like, well, it is impossible now for me to game. There's no way for me to game because this was the one group that I was able to get a hold of, and that's it. I guarantee you that there are other groups out there. I guarantee it. Even groups that you'll be able to see that aren't, online. Online is a great place to find people if that's the easiest way for you to do this sort of thing, if you're looking to play a certain game. But somehow you will find the right group if you are willing to put in the effort to do so. It doesn't make it easy, but it is always possible. In much the same way that you aren't going to ever run into a situation where there's only one person on the planet who could ever possibly tolerate being in your presence. No, you will find somebody who will be able to do that. Kaylin's got a question. I like questions. Let's throw this in there. How much time do you give a new group before you go, this isn't working for me? So, that's going to depend on your tolerance, because obviously if you are miserable, don't stick around, right? I'm even of the opinion that if you show up to a group and then the first half hour you're like, nope, this isn't for me and it never will be for me, just get up and walk. Like, it's okay. It's fine. There's no reason to be miserable at a table, and anybody, like, you don't have to be an asshole about getting up and leaving, but leave. You don't want to make everybody else at the table feel like they've inconvenienced or burdened you. But how much time do you give a new group before you go, this isn't working for me? I would say, if you're using your word hole properly, you got to give them at least 1 or 2 chances. And by chances, I mean, you show up for a session, you're kind of meh on the whole thing. So bring up your concerns with the people who you can bring it up with. If you're a player, talk to your GM, your storyteller, your DM. Say like, okay, well, this is what I was kind of looking for in the game. Because obviously, in the games that I run, so much of it is social in nature. But occasionally we're going to have a session which is full of combat. If you're the kind of person who's like, I really only want to play in a game if it's got social stuff in nature, but the first game that you play is one where there happens to be a lot of combat, you only have one data point. And one data point does not a statistical analysis make. So it is... sometimes it's worth staying for the whole session with a crappy group so you have fun stories to tell later. I mean, perhaps. It's amazing how our miserable experiences end up becoming things that we use and appreciate later on. But I will say that you have to make sure that you've got enough data points to be able to plot a reasonable line. And in general, that means that you have to have at least 3, if not 4. I'm not saying that this is a hard and fast rule, and if you know that things aren't going well, you know. But 3 or 4 is a good way of kind of knowing. However, if you have a conversation with the group that you're with, that counts as a data point. So if you play in one session and it doesn't go the way that you had hoped, and then you talk to them and say, this is what I was hoping for, and they say, oh, don't worry, that's going to happen. That's your second data point. And then the second session becomes your third, because then you find out whether they can back up what they told you. It's a good analogy. Yeah, stats. I mean, look, you're an academic, Kaylin. You got to be able to put up with some annoying analogies sometimes. But yeah, remember that your data points aren't just game sessions. Your data points are the conversations that you have with players. It's the way that you feel about the game while you're playing, and the way that you feel about the game after you've played, or the way that you feel just before a game starts. If your first reaction to, oh, it's game time is, how do I get out of this? Bad sign. Bad data, like good data point, but a data point definitely on the side of this is not a good experience for me. 3 is a pattern, 4 is a trend. That's more of an army thing. Yeah, but it's there. That is an appropriate thing to point out. So use that as a gauge to be able to find the group that you need to find. That's kind of what you're hoping for. Crosshair says you'll always get the, oh, come on, try a bit more, just play the session, other assorted things, which is one of my least favorite things. And again, if you're getting those and feel forced, wrong group confirmed. So absolutely. And remember that somebody saying, oh, just come on, without actually giving you any reason to feel assured, that is a data point that you can use. Because if I'm talking to somebody and they're expressing their feelings and their wishes to me, and instead of directly addressing those feelings or wishes, I instead say, oh, don't worry, you can trust me, everything's going to be fine. I'm not giving them any reason to trust me. I'm not giving them any reason to believe that I have something to offer. So in that case, that is a data point that you can hold on to. And once you got four data points that you can really look at and be like, I know what's going on here, that's when I would say that you know. 4 can mean 4 sessions, can mean 1 session and 3 conversations. It's usually a mixture of the two. But that's when you're gonna get a better idea of knowing whether something's going to work out or not. Requiem says, I actually had one group where I didn't feel it was working for me. And the GM said, tell you what, you have one more session, and if it's not for you, no hard feelings. Really appreciated that way of saying it. And that's kind of what you need. If somebody is like, but you have to play, definitely not something that you want to hear. That is not a good reason to be in a game. It is not a good reason to stay. Holding you hostage is a really, really bad sign. It's a huge red flag. What's holding somebody hostage? Saying, if you do not do something, then others will suffer. If you don't play in this game, then we all have to quit. That's still holding you hostage. That's essentially saying that I will kill this game if you don't do what I say. You see this in relationships too. You have to stay with me. If you don't stay with me, then I don't know what I'm going to do to myself, is a massive red flag. And you are not responsible for somebody else's well-being in that case. You have to be responsible for your own, which is a pretty serious way of sort of highlighting that a hostage situation is terrible for more than that. Thirst Kitty asked to say thank you for the shout out. Look, Thirst Kitty, you'll get a shout out whenever you want if you embrace it. Others will follow you. They'll flock to your banner. I know this. You can know it too. Just make the change. So if you're with a group and that group says, you know what, give it another shot, and if it doesn't work out, then that's fine. That's a pretty good sign. But if somebody says, if you quit, then that means we can't play, well, it's on them to find another player or to solve that problem. It's not on you to fix the game for them. And that's if somebody basically told me that my participation meant the difference between something proceeding or something not proceeding, in general, that's a good sign for me to say that I'm not participating at all. Now, you can make the argument that like I'm the storyteller for the games that we run on RPGClinic, and that if I don't run those games and those games end, yeah, I mean, that's pretty self-evident. But then again, in our games, if any of our players quit, that basically means the game is over. We would start a new one, potentially with a different player, if we had to, if other people were still interested. But that's not holding hostage. That's just us recognizing that that's the way that this group works. But if you are saying, I don't want to play, and other people are saying, but you have to, no, you don't. You do not have to. Nobody is forced to roleplay. Role-playing is not a requirement. It is not something that you need to do in life. It is something that you should want to do if you are going to be doing it. Crosshair says, also, if you go to your first tabletop role-playing game and the other players are in full cosplay gear and you're in t-shirt and jeans, might be a good data point to mark down. Yeah, but it could be a data point of saying, oh, great, I can come in costume. That's amazing. Maybe that's the kind of game you want to play in. But I will admit that I have had this situation where I've shown up to a game and everybody else was like super hype about something and I didn't even know it was a thing. And I'm like, not a good sign if everybody else did something and I didn't even know about it. And why is that? Was it because they neglected to tell me, they forgot to tell me, or because I wasn't paying attention? It is super awkward to show up to something where everybody's in costume and you're not. And it's almost worse if everyone's like, yeah, we're going to just, very basic costume bits. Just like make sure that you're dressing up kind of as your character and that's all that matters. And then you show up and everybody else has gone like to so much effort and you are like, but I thought I wasn't supposed to go all out. And they're like, oh, well, we meant a little bit, like bad data point. So the Crosshair also points out that the idea of hostages applies to GMs especially. Well, all this right group also applies to GMs, but being a hostage in a game doubly so. Yeah, if you're not having fun, you don't need to play. If you're a GM and you feel like you're a hostage in your game, run. I mean, people's intros to Kalen's TTRPGing is that Kalen shows up with a Crown Royal bag full of dice, a bad dice jail, mostly necessary books for character development, and some things to help with immersion, like handcrafted spellbooks. So for people who don't know, Catan is a costumer par extraordinaire. I miss Kalen's streams. I'm not sure whether I don't think I've seen you stream recently, but Catan used to stream costume creation, and it was always fascinating stuff. And it's a all right, Blood Ninja. Oh, Crown Royal bags. Yeah. They do make pretty good bags. But yeah, like if I knew that I was going to an event that was being run by Catan, then I would be like, I probably better make sure that my costume is on fucking point. Yeah, because of thesis. I totally get that. That's what I guessed. Crown Royal bags is a time-honored thingy. Totally. I don't have one anymore. You have been wanting to get back into it? You should totally get back into it. You should totally do that. Because they were cool as hell. Getting Diablo armor, seeing that process on camera was just like, Well, it depends on how much Crown Royal you drink. I don't even know if Crown Royal does the bags anymore, to be honest. But then again, I'm also like the wrong person to ask about this sort of thing. Learning OBS again, yeah. Well, we make sacrifices for our art. So what are your experiences in trying to find the right group? What's going on with that? How do you, have you handled it? How have you been in a situation where you've had players who you needed to reject, or even were there some times where you found somebody who you thought you would absolutely love to have in the game and had difficulty finding the right way to get them into your game? Love to hear it. Just post that in the chat. Buy it for my dad. It's his favorite. Fair. Only in the gift sets. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to remember that now. Real Brick Wall, maybe the trick is that you should find people who will buy Crown Royal for you. Is what I'm hearing. Of course, if I was doing alcohol, it would be a spirit like whiskey. I much prefer spirits over, like, I do not enjoy wine and I hate beer. But tequila, I'll at least that it's like an interesting taste for me. A taste that I wouldn't normally have. Yeah, I have had drinks in the past. I just don't enjoy it. I totally love being around other people who are drinking. I just don't do it myself. So, let's see here. Ruck says, I was in a bit of a bad group for longer than I should have been. Loved the people in the group, but the way they played wasn't for me. Felt a bit like a hostage of sorts, only because it was the only game group I could find. We are, by definition, we kind of latch on to groups that are niche because we feel like there may not be other groups. It's very difficult to let go of that feeling of, but I could find something better. Putting up with what I have now. The idea, the maxim of one in the hand is worth two in the bush is pervasive, but it doesn't always help us. So there is that. Kalen is horribly selective when it comes to game invitations. Husbys is usually the one who runs them and has a particular playstyle. Completely. You know, that makes a lot of sense, and that's okay. It's totally fine. You are allowed to be horribly selective, and it is, in fact, the way that I found the gaming group that I wanted to play with is by being selective. It would be easy for me to find other people to play, but I also realized that the way that I personally like running these RPGClinic sessions is to have these 3 players, because also 3 players are a lot easier to wrangle. 3 players and 1 GM, that sort of scheduling is possible. Every additional person that you add makes it exponentially harder to make sure that everybody's there for a session, and I do not like running sessions where somebody is missing. And you'll find that the more players you have, the more often that'll happen. Even if everyone's just like, I can commit to the time that you said, doesn't work out that way. Rubric, while you are pretty enough to get people to buy you drinks, you just need to, if you're not currently wearing glasses, you need to put some on. If you are wearing glasses, you need to take them off. If your hair is down, you have to put it up. If your hair is up, you have to put it down. If you are dressed in uptight clothing, you need to feel free to dress in the clothing that will make you self-expressive and feel comfortable. If you do not know what clothes those are, you need to find a friend who will take you on a mall makeover shopping spree. This is what I've learned from movies, and movies could not possibly be wrong. 12 Dex Boxes says, kind of a trial by fire. I used to be in charge of an online RPG venue with about 120 people at some point. We would play using the old Google Hangouts. Oof. I used to run about 20 hours worth of scenes on weekends till that drained me of most of my passion for games, and the people who offered to run games for me are now my group that I play with. Sometimes it's the people who are there when you are at your most vulnerable that are the ones who end up winning that trust and who deserve your play. I am totally with you. I have been that person of being in charge of an online RPG venue. I have totally been there, and it is draining and thankless in a lot of ways. So it is a thing to keep in mind. I do need contact lenses, to be honest, but I'm not going to see an optometrist in a pandemic. I am with you there. I have to hope that my prescription hasn't changed, because I ain't going somewhere. Not here, not in Montreal. The assumptions that people have at times is simply mind-boggling. It is. Because the more people who are involved in a group, the more people are more concerned with themselves as opposed to the group. It's only the storyteller's stated job in a lot of ways to make sure that everyone is having fun. Games should be more open about the idea that your job is to make sure that everyone has fun, whether you're a player or a storyteller, and everyone includes all players and the storyteller, or DM or GM or whatever you want to call it. Heard the prompt. So I've had one group for the past 8 years, just friends playing, as heard before. It's not really sparking joy as such. It's fun, but it's not what I'm looking for. They want to roll dice. I'd like to role play. Don't really have the time to look for a different group at the moment, but in the future. So to get my fix, just gonna roll dice and kill gobbos. So this kind of goes against what I just spent an hour talking about, but I can bring it up. Sometimes the right group is the group that you have right now, because that's all you have the energy to do, the energy to find. Because like I said, it does take energy. It takes time and effort and work to find the people who you want to have in your group. And if right now you're just like, I don't have the time or the energy, but I still want to play, then the right group is the one that you have. It does mean, though, that you are going to have to put up with that group. So if that's the group that you are able to have right now, and it is a group that you can put up with and tolerate, great. You've got it. You've got the right group. For now. That doesn't mean that it's the right group forever. So it's just something to keep in mind, to hold on to. Things change. And just because I have the right group that I have right now, just because I love the players that I have, doesn't mean that that will be true in 5 years, in 5 months, or even in 5 days. The trick is to always be checking in, to look for it, and to not necessarily question what you have, but to challenge yourself to make sure that you're not being complacent. Because complacency is one of the ways where you'll find dissatisfaction slowly creeps in like a mold. And once that mold sets into the walls, you can't get it out without really tearing shit down. I mean, that's a belabored analogy, but but it's the one I have right now. It's the one I can offer. Crosshair says, yeah, I do want to caveat, I'm having fun with the folks. And I would drop it if I wasn't. It's just more playing than gaming. Yep. There's some board games that I play even though I'm not super thrilled with them. I don't have a ton of fun with them, but I'll play them anyway because it's still more fun to be playing a game than not. And there are some board games that I just won't play anymore because I don't have fun playing them. Ticket to Ride, while I believe is a good game and definitely a game worth checking out, is a game that I don't play anymore, and I kind of don't want to. And if people bring it up, then unless somebody is desperate to, I just say no. And the main reason why is because this is going to sound really stupid, but it's a reason, and it's my reason, is that I've never lost a game of Ticket to Ride. And it means that if I play, either everybody is going to gang up on me, in which case I'm not going to have fun right away, or people are going to forget and I will win because my strategy that I've sorted for myself in that game is just good enough that like I'm just sitting there kind of knowing that that's what's going to happen and that's the way it goes. So It's a game that I've just decided that I don't want to play anymore because honestly, I think a lot of people could have a lot of fun with that game. It's just not for me. I'm just a retired Ticket to Ride player. It's not that like I would hate losing. It's that I don't know if I would be okay with losing if I felt like the only reason I was losing is because everybody else was just like, oh, but we have to, like, no matter what, we have to make sure that that guy loses. And that's not an interesting sort of situation for me. I don't imagine that, like, and honestly, I'm pretty sure that if I play Ticket to Ride tomorrow, it wouldn't be that way, and it's probably fine. But there was a time where I was playing with a group of people and they'd play all the time and I'd win every single time, until one time where they were all like, okay, well, we're going to play again, but we're just going to make sure that he loses. And that's when I just said, I'm not playing this anymore. Settlers of Catan is not a great game. It is an important game, but it is not a great game. And Risk is only fun if you're playing on a computer where all the dice rolls are automated and instantaneous. Those are my lukewarm gaming takes. The Crosshair points out, quick tip to anyone: if you're not having fun GMing a group, try being a player or suggest it. I can have fun stabbing dragons, but not so much being the points ref for it. Yeah. If that's what everybody else is interested in playing and it's not what you're interested in running, then don't run it. I think that's completely legitimate. I have, for instance, one of the experiences of D&D that I had, which I loved, was a D&D 4th edition game where I was a player, and I would hate running that game. I'd hate it. I'd absolutely destroy myself running that game because I wouldn't want to be the referee for that. But I love playing in it. The group that I was playing with had tons of miniatures, and they had the setup, and they played on a board where they had it all set up properly, and they had a sound system, and they had it all figured out, and I had a ton of fun playing. It was great because I didn't have to focus on anything except my own character. And for once, I didn't have to worry about role-playing that much, and I could just enjoy the wargaming aspect of it. And so for a time, that's the game that I really enjoyed playing. It's rare because I'm not typically the guy who does enjoy that section of the game, but for that one period of time, adored it. Absolutely adored it. I still think Risk is fun. It's just unfortunately, the way that it's set up, most of the game is spent logistics instead of actually playing. The number of decisions that you get to make in a game of Risk is not worth the playtime or the risk of playing and then having it being disrupted. So. Soul Search, I also love complicated games, but often I convince my family to play, and the minute there's too many rules, they start looking zoned out, and I feel discouraged. Yeah, that's why when it comes to games, I've looked for games that the rules are relatively simple, but there are a lot of different variants that get added to the game. Dominion is probably a game that I can get anybody to play because the rules are actually very simple. The complexity comes in the different cards and the different kingdoms that exist, but it's not that difficult because the only rules that you need to know right off the top of the bat are action, buy, clean up. And that's it. You can teach somebody to play that game in 5 minutes or less. Because then when they start playing, they're like, okay, now I have to read the card. But because it's a gradual accumulation of knowledge, it's a bit easier for that. Exploding Kittens is a lot of fun. Betrayal at House on the Hill, I despise. That's harsh, and I don't actually despise it. But Betrayal at House on the Hill, for me, is a story generation game. It is not a gameplay game. I have never enjoyed the game aspect of Betrayal at House on the Hill. I've only enjoyed the stories that come out of playing it. And I think that it can be a lot of fun for people who are not interested in strategy. But to me, Betrayal at House on the Hill is a complete chance toss. The amount of strategy involved in that game is incredibly small, and it takes there's no way to kind of regulate whether it takes a million years before the interesting part of the game happens, or if it comes across so quickly that all the fun sucked out of it anyway. So, because you can't control who the trader is in Betrayal at House on the Hill. So at the first part, you're just exploring the house, in which case you're just moving around doing things, but like there's no strategy involved. There is nothing that you can do to strategize other than try to find as many items or stat boosts that you can and hope that you get the dice rolls that you want, which isn't much of a strategy at all. And then when the haunt happens and the traitor comes out, maybe you're in the right position for it and maybe you're not. Maybe you are the traitor and you were the one who was lucky enough to get all the cool shit, or maybe the traitor just happens to be in a place and they're like, well, I have to get to this room, and that room is literally on the other side of the house and everybody's in between you. Like, it's all chance. The whole thing is chance. And a game that's all chance needs to be more interesting to me than that. It does a lot of things right, and it has a lot of powerful narrative potential, but there isn't enough game in there for me to really enjoy it. So that's, again, my lukewarm take on Betrayal. Now, to be fair, I have not played the Legacy version, and I have not played the expansion. I will say, though, that I have recommended this game to several people, and it is definitely a game that I think people can have a lot of fun playing. So do not take my my suggestion as this is a bad game. Take it as this is a game that, for me, I have trouble enjoying it. But I'll play Betrayal at House on the Hill before I play Ticket to Ride. I have enjoyed playing it. I've played it with like Liz and Scott and Kate and like had a good time. But I got into it knowing that I wasn't really playing a game. I was there to find out what the hell was going to happen. And when it did, I was like, okay, that was fun. So, Requiem says, was in one group playing D&D 2nd edition where the GM was constantly railroading us into plots. A friend and I were constantly getting red flags, but one session was basically the last straw. Long story short, we were being forced by some government to raid and ambush their supplies. We demanded some kind of letter of marque. No dice rolls at all to convince otherwise. GM just said no, so we said not going to do it. And yeah, it turned into basically do it or die. Yeah, that doesn't sound a whole lot of fun. But for some people, maybe that's amazing. There are definitely players out there who just need to be told what to do. They need to be given an excuse. And once they have the excuse, they go off and do it. But that's not what everybody's looking for in their role-playing games. So you just gotta be careful. Soul Search. If you're still here, which I don't think you are, but if you are, suggest Dominion to your family. Dominion would be the game. Try to get the 2nd edition. The 2nd edition is only different from the 1st edition in that they took out some of the like really crappy cards and they added better cards, better balanced cards. But the 1st edition is still totally fine. It's just some of the cards you'll find are just not that good. But it doesn't make the game it doesn't make the game unbalanced because everybody has to deal with the crappy cards. So. Xenogames, you had to just kill off your character to show that you wouldn't put up with being forced to do something that you hated in a bad game. I mean, yeah, you could do that. I'm at the point in my life where now I just don't have time for that. And I would just be like, okay, cool, I'm out. Sorry, I'm just not enjoying this. Requiem Law says that nothing destroys friendships and rips apart families better than Monopoly. Monopoly is definitely divisive. I really enjoy playing Monopoly. Liz actually alluded to this in a previous stream. Liz loves playing Monopoly with house rules, and I love playing Monopoly with the rules as written, because I believe that the rules as written is the way that Monopoly should be played. The point of Monopoly is that eventually somebody manages to control the economy. And the reality of it is that when you introduce house rules, most of the time it's adding money to the economy at a rate that essentially makes it very difficult for the game to proceed properly. Things like you're supposed to auction off properties. If somebody lands on it, nobody wants it, you're supposed to put that property up for auction. If you mortgage a property, you're supposed to not be able to have houses or hotels on any of the properties in that chain, right? Like there's things. Diplomacy was the game that I was going to bring up. Diplomacy is the game that is the most destructive when it comes to board games and friendships and families. Because when you get screwed over in a game of diplomacy, it's because somebody chose to fuck you over. It's not dice. It's not like, oh, well, it just happened to be that this is how it turned out. No. If you're playing diplomacy and somebody screws you over, that's because they decided, they took one look at you and they were like, you're going down. So, and since diplomacy takes such a long time to play, it means that you get really invested, and that those betrayals hurt. Requiem lost no money for landing on free parking. Yep, money for landing on free parking means that you're introducing money to the economy. You can't bankrupt somebody if they're constantly just getting handouts. Because the point of Monopoly is to teach people, in reality, that not communism, what am I saying? Capitalism is awful. That the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that going to jail, if it's early in the game, is terrible, but going to jail past the mid-game is the best thing that could happen to you. So, you know, the whole point of Monopoly, the whole point from its original designer, who was not Charles Darrow, by the way, he stole the game, was to show, it was originally called the Landlord's Game. It was to show that capitalism was fucking awful. The one house rule I enjoyed was when a player could buy the jail, which was an interesting narrative on private jail systems. Damn, that's cold. That's cold. The Crosshair says, I accept house rules. I can even say I support them, but I prefer to play by the rules, but that's my tactical mind talking. I like to know what rules I'm working with and how to use them to win. So yeah, house rules suck if you don't know the rules. I remember that one of my earlier experiences with the Settlers of Catan was somebody who refused to tell me what the rules of the expansion were, but was taking advantage of them mid-game. But I couldn't take advantage of them because I didn't know what they were. And when I asked what they were, she was like, don't worry about it. So yeah. Not knowing the rules sucks, but yeah, for Monopoly, I feel very strongly. Oh yeah, she wanted to win. She wanted to get people to play because she was like, I really enjoy the expansion. I think it was Cities and Nights or whatever. And she really wanted to play it and enjoy it that way. But the problem came up that she was like, okay, but the rules are complicated. So she gave us the extremely basic rundown, didn't give us any of the specifics. We started playing the normal game of Settlers, and then she just started taking advantage of all these rules that she had neglected to tell us earlier. And we were like, well, that's not fair. And she was like, well, we'll play again. But like, we'd been playing for 45 minutes. We didn't want to play again after that because we just got owned by somebody who knew the rules. Much like with CCG, fun comes first, but after that, the gloves are off. I'm there to win. One of the things that we have to remember when it comes to collectible card games is that people have fun in different ways. You might have fun playing the most strategic decks, the most optimized decks, and learning how to play and pilot a deck in the most optimized fashion, where somebody else might like to play just trying to come up with the most crazy combos, or somebody might like to play because they're a total Timmy and they like putting down big creatures and swinging with them. I remember that on the set of LARPs, season 2, several of the crew were bringing in Magic decks and said, oh, you should play. And I'm like, well, I sold my Magic cards a long time ago. I hadn't played in a long time. He was like, no, it's fine. You should play. Print out a deck and come in and play with us. And I was like, okay. So I went back and I built a deck and I came in and I played and I absolutely destroyed the field. Because I had actually played a deck, because when I was playing Magic, I was quite good at it. And they were like, okay, well, like, that's not fair. You printed out all these, like, you printed out like such a perfect deck. And I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. And they were like, well, like, how much would this deck cost? And I said that the deck would cost like over $1,000 to build because Magic is stupid expensive. And pointed out that their decks were also expensive. They just weren't optimized. And they were like, okay, well, build a deck that's only commons and uncommons. So I did. I built a deck that was only commons and uncommons, and I wrecked them. And they were like, well, what the fuck? And so I said, fine. And they had said, build a deck that's only commons. And I knew that this would happen again, but I went home, built a deck that was only commons, came back, destroyed them all over again. And then I realized that what they wanted to do was basically just screw around and build decks and play with people at their own skill level. They were not interested in taking the game to the level that I had taken it to. But I also realized that I wasn't going to have fun if I deliberately had to hamper my deck building ability just to be able to play on their level. I didn't want to handicap myself to say, well, I'm going to make suboptimal decisions because I couldn't really limit my card pool. I was a better player. Yeah, in that case, I was a better player. And it's who was up in my grill? It was none of the cast. I'll say that much. It was none of the cast. I don't think that any of the people who I was playing with are people who you would know as like people who have been associated publicly with LARPs. So it isn't really worth bringing it up. But the reality is that they were having fun on a different level than I was. So, and that's a lot of the case. That's the same with role playing, right? Like if you're totally into playing in a game to super min-max your characters and to create the best builds and then, wreck adventures because you have an amazing build, and every other player at the game really wants to get into, making the princess cry through dramatic escalando or I totally butchered that, didn't I? I need to know. Escandolo, that's it. If you manage to do that, if that's what everybody else wants to do and it's not what you want to do, then you shouldn't be playing with them. And in that case, I shouldn't have been playing Magic with them. And it's not because I was doing it wrong, and it's not because they were doing it wrong. It was because they were playing fundamentally a different game than I was playing, and they weren't interested in playing my game, and I wasn't interested in playing theirs. Escandolo. Okay, escándalo. Yeah, sorry, I'm afraid I do not speak Spanish. Only commons ass kicking. That's rough. It's not actually that hard. They were saying that I could basically build. At the time, it was like as long as it fit in modern, and I was like, that's a huge card pool. So, but yeah. Part of finding a right group is finding the people who actually want to play the same game that you do. And playing the same game that you do does not necessarily mean we all want to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's playing the kind of Dungeons and Dragons that you want to play. So the Crosshair says, my friend is a power player, as it were, optimals, blue player, etc. I play silly idea decks. We have fun because I get to win at times against super decks, and he gets to tune my fun ideas to be better, but still stay in the stupid sector. So yes, but you've also agreed to play the same game. Even though he is playing decks that are super optimized and you're playing more silly fun decks, it's still an opportunity for you to find the fun playing against each other, because you're also not putting super investment in being able to win at all costs. When I quit Magic, I kept like 2 decks. I kept one deck because it was just a goofy fun deck that I just kept around, and I kept one deck to remind me why I quit, because it was a deck that literally could win on turn, like at the time it was a deck that could win on turn 2, and it was basically me playing solitaire, and it was just fucking garbage. It was so degenerate and dumb and stupid that I was just like, no, I'm not doing this anymore, because if that's what Magic can be, and if that's the kind of people who I was playing with, then no, I didn't want it. Giant Rat Guy saying, me at NES and SNES, no one wanted to play with me since I owned the console and was always the better player. Same with N64, I was a god of GoldenEye 007 at 14 years old. So I will say that it can be difficult sometimes, especially for complicated games, to get other people to play, because if you've played the complicated game before, you're almost certainly going to win, and not a lot of people want to invest a shit ton of time in learning a game that they're going to lose, at least at the beginning, because it's so complicated. I bought a game during the pandemic, hoping that I would get a chance to play it. But it is a game that I'm not even opening, because I know that if I open it and I learn it before the people who I get to play it with, it means that we'll play it once. I will destroy them. They won't want to play again because I'll have just already advanced myself too far. Way better to experience a game together as a group. So there is that. I will also point out that GoldenEye 007 is one of the reasons why my first date with my current partner went so well, was because I got fucking wrecked at GoldenEye 007. I got super fucking owned and I had so much fun getting destroyed. But the best part about it was that I was with her, and I saw how she acted when she lost, because we had played other games and I'd beaten her. But she also saw, I also saw her at her best, and that she was not a sore winner. And she was having a lot of fun with it, but she also didn't pull all of her punches. She didn't let me win. But she also started, challenging herself a little bit while playing, but not in a way that I felt like I was being overly toyed with. And it was amazing. I fell hard because of 007 and my awfulness at it. So Requiem Lost says, can I just say that one of my personal peeves in games, and I know it does not apply to everyone, is playing games where we start not knowing each other. Insert fancy word I can't remember. I much prefer to play games where we start knowing each other. Insert fancy word I can't remember. But I always find myself in groups where they demand no one knows each other. Yeah, but that means that you need to find games where you are able to know people. Or negotiate for that. Like, okay, well, maybe we haven't known each other for long, but can we at least be aware of each other's names and be aware of, who they are in a certain context? Maybe we can each write out a paragraph about who we are that everyone else gets to know. So, so I did wander around the top of stacks for a little while as he got his bearings. So that's fair, because it's no fun killing somebody who doesn't even know the controls properly. Yeah, no fun hunting prey that's lost. It's okay to let somebody gradually get into the game, but I didn't want to feel that okay, well, I'll only play with one hand because you're terrible. If I'm gonna die, I should die. The thing that I cannot stand more than almost anything is knowing that somebody let me win even though I should have lost. Because then I feel like it's not a victory. Now, somebody who's well, I tried playing an unoptimal strategy and you won, that's different. It's still, depending on what situation you're in, that can still feel kind of bad, but that can honestly be just fine. But if I know that somebody could win and they deliberately don't make the move that would have them win just so that I can win instead, and they can be like, oh, you did it, good job, can't stand it. Teaching people to play Android Netrunner, I will absolutely play decks that are lower power level so that somebody can get used to it. Or I could say okay, this is what I would have done because that would make me win, but let's examine what would happen otherwise, just in case, so that they can get a better understanding of the game. That is fine. But I would hate to learn Netrunner if it felt like somebody was just kind of pretending that they sucked for the first 5 games, and then afterwards, once I was okay, well, I seem to have gotten the hang of it, and then they just are okay, well, now I'm playing for real. No. You don't get to fake that I won. That's not fun. Can I have one more turn? Fair. It's something that you also see sometimes in MOBAs, where Dota 2 or League of Legends, where someone will be like, don't end the game because they're just having too much fun destroying the other team. The most satisfying thing in the world is when your team is getting wrecked. They don't end when they should, and then you manage to pull a comeback. Like, that's fantastic. Oh, that's good. GoldenEye N64 emulator. On that day, it was on a genuine N64. It was in a bar that had classic consoles set up that you could just play while you sat and ate. You basically requested a game and somebody would come by and they'd pop the game in. It was just it was a good place. Used to be better, and now I don't think it's any good at all, because they also used to have arcade games that you could play. But the thing is that Quebec rules around arcades kind of messy, and I think they lost their liquor license to a certain thing. Mike, I don't know if you ever went to Funzo. Like, also, did you ever go to Funzo when it was good? But yeah, remember bars? Yeah. Quebec being 90s again? Yeah, well. It's the way it is. Rip Funzo. Yeah. Yeah, when they had Street Fighter cabinets, it was actually good. You're from Montreal? Hey, giant rat guy. Hopefully you're not somebody who I've just been trash talking this past, 2 hours. I haven't been trash talking anybody. The Crosshair says, I kind of want to start making the 10 commandments based on my learning from the clinic. One would definitely be, do you GM so others will have fun, or do you GM to have fun? And of course, use your word hole. Not to quote John, but to find my own rules. Yeah, go ahead. Go find them. It was after I moved back from Australia 6 years ago now. Yeah. Funzo used to be great. And then it was less great. And now I don't even think that it's, well, I don't even know if they're still operating. I doubt it. Your phone wouldn't let me join, so laptop it is. Soul Search, now that you're back, find games with complexity in them that are introduced gradually. Legacy games are great for this, but also try cooperative games that are complicated. Pandemic is one that I would suggest, although subject matter right now, but Pandemic. But Dominion. Yeah, definitely Dominion. Funzo's Fun Zone. So this was Funzo, Foonzo, I think. Yeah, Pandemic Legacy Season 1. Play that game. That game is fucking amazing. Although I'd honestly recommend playing the normal Pandemic first, then play Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I don't recommend Season 2, and I haven't played Season 0. Tried playing Root with my family and just couldn't. So Root is a gorgeous game, and it's really interesting, but Root's the kind of game that you have to learn with a group together, because otherwise it gets way too unbalanced. If one person knows what's going on, then it's hard for everybody. The other thing is that Root is a massive Kingmaker game, and your mileage with Kingmaker games may vary. Crosshair says we played Pandemic during the Christmas holiday. It's still fun. No one remembered how to play, but when the group starts to work together, magic. Yeah, Pandemic is fantastic. It's a great game. Honestly, you said Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I wondered, is this irony? Yeah, I know. I totally recognize it. But of the Pandemic Legacy games, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is probably the best one that I've played. No, not probably. It is the best one that I've played, and it remains an excellent game. But the subject matter may not be terribly fun for people right now. Yeah, play with some people online. Root's a good game to play online with people. That's a good idea. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to play games with people again, but I do admit that if I have to struggle with an online interface, then I'm a lot less likely to want to play. So, there's that. There is that. I love co-op board games. I'm not a huge fan of playing against people only because I'm not good at it, were I to be honest. I like co-op board games because I think that it can be a lot of fun to win and lose as a group. And you don't have to isolate people, because then it becomes less about whether you're better than everybody else at the table. It becomes whether the table together can do. But it also takes the right kind of group. I would not want to only play cooperative games. I do enjoy playing against people. I do enjoy kind of exercising skill and dueling with people to find out, who has the best strategy in any one particular point. But cooperative games are a ton of fun. Cards Against Humanity and Know Your Meme. So I'll also point out that while I'm talking about these games, just know that when I'm talking about games, they're my opinions. And if you enjoy these games, please enjoy them. Do not take my word as gospel for these things. And if I'm exercising a little bit of hyperbole, it's hyperbole. It really is. But Cards Against Humanity is the game that cowards play because they want to be... I'm not saying that everybody who plays this is this. I'm saying that this is why it's extremely popular. It's a game for people who want to be offensive, but are cowardly and need to be able to say, "But the game made me do it." Play Quiplash. Quiplash is a way better game than Cards Against Humanity, in my opinion. But also in Quiplash, what you write is because you wrote it, and so you can't kind of say, "Well, it's because I have the card in hand, so it's okay for me to say this horrifically offensive thing." No, instead it's something that you had to come up with. You can own it. And that doesn't mean that you can't do something that's offensive. I've played Quiplash with people and we have made jokes that are, I'm not going to say that like we make super offensive jokes, but we definitely make jokes that are like moments where there's a bit of like, oof, and that's because at the very least we can be like, yep, we did it. We did it for ourselves. We're the ones who came up with that answer. Cards Against Humanity for me, it comes down to, did you draw the cards that are funnier? And I kind of like, look, I actually really enjoyed playing Cards Against Humanity when it first came out. And I think that it's definitely a game that people can enjoy and play. But now that I can essentially play Quiplash whenever I want, I don't play Cards Against Humanity. It's okay to make perverted jokes. It's okay, depending on the group that you're with. The trick is that in Cards Against Humanity, sometimes you just have a handful of cards that aren't that funny. And in reality, I find, at least in my group, that it's only about 20% of the time that you came up with a really clever card combination, and that's the thing that won. Way too often, it's because you happen to have a card in hand that somebody finds funny. And it doesn't really matter what the original prompt was. They just like the card that came up. Which is why I like Quiplash, because you essentially have to come up with your own prompts. So, my favorite winning card set, it wasn't mine from Apples to Apples, was Clue, Stunning, Answer Card, Stun Gun. Yeah. See, like, that's funny. I like Apples to Apples more than I like Cards Against Humanity these days. Because Apples to Apples, you're not relying on the funniness of the card. You're relying on the cleverness of your match. Because there are some cards that just aren't going to be funny. Like, if you're ever playing Cards Against Humanity against Julian, you need to hold on to any card that references shit, and he'll love it, because he just really, really goes in for shit jokes. Whereas if you have those same cards and you play them on me, I probably won't vote for you, because I just don't find shit jokes that funny. So it's just the way it is. It's fine to be perverted, just don't be a perv. I think I can get behind that concept. Bye, Amber. But yeah, so like, it's totally fine to enjoy Cards Against Humanity if you want. I just find that, yeah, Requiem says there's not a high skill ceiling there. Either you get lucky or you know how much or what will break each player. There are other kind of card matching games that I think are better. Like Joking Hazard, I think, is better than Cards Against Humanity. But yeah, like, play the Jackbox games. They're Jackbox is kind of where it's at these days. I really think that they knock it out of the park. And the most recent Jackbox Party Pack is definitely worth picking up for Quiplash alone. But there are other great games in that set as well. Some cards are Clue paired to white cards, so it's harder to make them work elsewhere. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But the main thing that kind of... Champed Up was super fun the one time I tried it. Yeah, Champed Up is a lot of fun. I think that's the second best game in Party Pack 7. The only issue with Champed Up that I find is that sometimes the connection is bad because you're downloading so much data to your phone, and their servers kind of get backed up, and then it's a problem because every once in a while you'll find one player who's like, I can't vote because I can't see what's going on, and that's kind of annoying. Balderdash is fun, yeah. Cards Against Creation game where you come up with funny combinations of exalted stuff. Yeah. Emerlaus, I'm not sure if it ever got released outside. But the thing about Cards Against Humanity that kind of really turned me off was playing with a group of people who were playing it, and they essentially were just using it as an excuse to like say horrible things basically to be racist and sexist and for it to be funny in that way. And I'm like, I don't see the irony in what you're doing here. And I know that that's what people claim. It's like, oh no, it's funny because I'm not racist, but I'm saying a racist thing. And I'm like, that's not irony. That's not what funny is. So I just got super uncomfortable at that point. It was like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to play this anymore. I remember for Christmas a couple of years ago, my family got together and kind of like the youths. So essentially everyone around my age, so not really the youths, were like, let's play a game. Let's all play Cards Against Humanity. And I'm like, oh, but we could play Quiplash. And they were like, what's Quiplash? And by the end of the night, everybody was just playing Quiplash. And they were like, I'm never playing Cards Against Humanity again. And they all went out and bought Quiplash afterwards. So, you know, there are certain things that are an advantage there when it comes to board games. I mean, hey, we're discussing board games today alongside RPGs. Why not? Incidentally, finding the right group goes for a lot of things. Goes for online games too, for role-playing games, but also goes for playing like video games. If you find a good group to play video games with, then you can put up with a lot. Like some of my favorite online games right now is League of Legends, but League of Legends that I'm playing with my group of friends that I play League with, because they all play League the way that I want to play League, which is like without getting overly salty about it, trying but not trying like, you know, super hard, but still, you know, putting an effort into it and basically there to have a good time. Like that's fantastic. But it's becoming harder and harder for us all to get together because we're just busy, and you know, a bunch of us have kids now, and it's kind of hard to find time with kids, especially during a pandemic. So try to keep my League play to a light dusting of salt. Yeah. A friend of mine always joke about playing a quick game of Sins of a Solar Empire. Yeah. Oof. Yikes. Board games apply in finding the right group. Totally does. It totally does. Any other questions or comments that people want to toss out there? Because we're getting close to time. We're not quite there yet. We can always end early if we need to, but see if there's anything that strikes people's fancy. I recognize that my energy isn't as high as it would normally be. I have just spent the last period of time moving, and it is a difficult situation to say the best, but worst comment I ever got in online gaming. Sorry, you can't play Left 4 Dead with us. You're not fast enough. Well, then don't play with them. Fuck them. Screw that. So yeah, been moving, but thankfully that seems to be going all right. Because moving's not the kind of thing that you want to do all the time. I know I'm dropping some truth bombs on everybody here, but such is the way of things. Moving is draining without a pandemic, so like double the drainage, if not triple, I imagine. Yeah, the pandemic made it really not fun. You had a thing, Crosshair? Go ahead. Have a thing. What non-RPG things would I do to help introduce a group to the ideas of role-playing games? I would introduce them to role-playing games. That's what I would do. If I really wanted to, I would kind of make allusions to other things. I could be like, oh, did you play Final Fantasy Tactics? Well, that's an awful lot like D&D 4th edition. Oh, did you like this particular novel? Well, that's a setting that's very similar to this kind of role-playing game. I would bring other outside things that they might have experienced, but I wouldn't do something with them to try to get them to like role-playing games. I would just introduce it, and if they're not into it, I would also be okay with it. Remember that if you want to get somebody into something, if you are overly eager, they will not latch onto it. My partner and I have both introduced each other to things successfully by setting it out there, saying, I really enjoy this thing, and then leaving it the fuck alone. And let the other person get to that in time so that they can then appreciate it on their own merits instead of feeling like they're being forced into it and feeling like they're forced to like it because the other person likes it so much. Don't fucking like jam it down somebody's throat, because that's an instant way to get them to hate it. It took me a long time for me to watch Gravity Falls. And it's not because I had anything against it. I was just like, oh, I don't know. Maybe at some point, maybe later. But I was never forced into it. And then when I finally was like, okay, let's put this on, absolutely adored it and loved it. Like, it's a fantastic show. I loved Gravity Falls, but if it was forced on me, I never would have played it. So, there's that. Do not force, especially with role-playing games. Do not force. Forcing is bad. Set it out and let them come to it, right? Like, don't be the person who runs up to a dog and shoves your hand in the dog's face. Let the dog come to you. It's okay. The Crosshair says, I can't remember what my question was. It had something to do with, oh, right. How can you become, if at all, a better fit for your group you want to be a part of, but they're not really feeling it? Find out what they're looking for and then emulate that behavior. If that's kind of like the best piece of advice that I can give you, and it's the only piece of advice that can matter, is don't do it if it's something that you aren't willing to do. Sometimes faking it is the next step to actually liking it. This is one of the things that I've learned. I don't have personal experience with this, but there's such a thing as a PUD. And a PUD is somebody who is poly under duress. That's somebody who's in a relationship and their partner is somebody who is poly and basically says, well, I'm either going to stay in this relationship, but we're going to open it up, or I'm going to leave you because I need to be in an open relationship. And so the person is poly under duress. They are opening the relationship because they feel that it's either that or they have no relationship at all. And a lot of people who are into the poly lifestyle end up that way because they started as poly under duress. They started not necessarily thinking that they were going to like it, and then they were introduced to it and they got used to it and then they liked it. The hell are we talking about? So in the same way, if you are part of a gaming group and they're like, this is something that we want you to be, this is the thing that we're looking for in the group, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to like that, but you try it, you might find that you actually like it. Kung Fu Fenris, I was talking about how to get somebody to how to become a better fit for a group if they're not feeling you. And one of the ways is to ask what they're looking for and then to emulate that behavior. You just have to be warned that emulating behavior that you don't necessarily follow might be difficult at first and it might be uncomfortable, but you may find that you'll like it eventually. And the analogy that I was drawing was that there are people out there who are polygamous, or I should say polyamorous. Polygamous is something else entirely. Who are polyamorous, not because they initially thought they were polyamorous, but because they were introduced to the polyamory lifestyle by somebody who is basically like, I need to be in an open relationship, and they decided that it was worth paying that price of admission to be in an open relationship than to not be in the relationship at all. But then they gradually realized that it's something that they want and enjoy as well. So I have to admit, though, that I don't have any real experience in this other than that my very first romantic partner wanted to open the relationship, but I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. And then they went ahead and did it anyway. But, I was young and dumb and didn't realize what was going on. I might have changed my mind if I had been more aware, but, young, dumb, first relationship, that kind of thing. They were just slamming their hand on the self-destruct button on the relationship. It was doomed. It was doomed, and I was just holding on to it. I was clinging to it like a life raft. So it does always boil down to use your word hole. Talk what folks want. Talk if you have issues. Find data points that the group is a good fit. Yeah, that's fair. Do no touch button. Just slam your hand down on that button. And I should point out, though, that there are people also who are poly under duress who then decide that it's not for them, and then they decide to quit. And that's also okay. So you could try emulating the behavior of another gaming group, and if it's something that you just really can't put up with, then it's okay to quit afterwards. You tried, and it didn't work out. Nothing against them, nothing against you. Unless, of course, they're asking you to be like a super racist asshole, in which case, don't do it. just don't do that. As if it was that easy. Yeah, a lot of people come to Polyam by being metamors and just as many leave. I'll try new things. Yep. Fair. It's also okay to not play games like at all. Yes, totally. I spent years not playing role-playing games because I just wasn't ready or into it at that time because I was too burned out and I didn't have the right group to play with. And I was just like, no, I'm good. I don't need this. I just don't need this. And I got back into it when I found a group that I felt like I could play with and that I could enjoy. So that's what I did. And I encourage all of you to play when you want to play. Don't play because you feel like you have to. And don't force yourself to play if the only games that are available to you are ones that are going to make you miserable. So that's that. That might be a good kind of way to leave off. One thing that I can say is that while we did not get the chance to run last Sunday because didn't have internet access of all things, then what you can do at that point is just enjoy knowing that on Sunday we are all things hopefully we're going to be able to play this Sunday. And this Sunday it'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on this channel. But before then, tomorrow Elizabeth and Scott will be doing some more Drew Crew, and that's going to be at 2? Is it 2 or 3? Might be 3. I never know. I'm terrible. You're copying and pasting your response because so that it gets the attention it deserves. Fair. Let's bring it up on the screen. 3 p.m. is Drew Crew. Okay, great. And lo, by the glowing light of the monitor, the Jev did speak, and he spoke the word of clinic, and the word was good. Up and to the right. Saturday, 3 p.m. Drew Crew. Yeah, tomorrow's Punchy at 6 p.m. I think they might still be playing Hades. I'm not sure if they're still on that, because, again, last Friday I had other things going on in my life. Castle Crashers. Oh, boy. That's definitely a game that they could be playing, so that'll be worth a watch. They're great people to watch anyway. Folks, thanks so much. Yeah, go on the Discord. Come hang out with us. Go talk with us. We talk about all kinds of things. It's fun. We talk about serious things too. That's also fun, but a different kind of fun and more supportive than fun sometimes, but that's the way it is. SB Rally, we usually know because we mod cool people. You are mod cool people. But at any rate, lo, I did speak, and the word was good. Up and to the right. See you soon.